Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, what?
But let's go ahead and kick it off with our first segment and find out more about how the team brought the iconic Lara Croft into Dead by Daylight. All right, so those who are new to our streams, you might see, or usually watch our streams, you'll see that Dave is usually our go-to guy for talking about everything lore, but today we want to introduce a new part of our narrative team who's been basically working on bringing in existing characters into the fog. So please join me in welcoming narrative designer William A. Mitchell.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here in the space for the first time. It's kind of surreal.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal for the first couple of times. But we're going to go ahead and hop in to talking about how the narrative team has collaborated with Dave to bring in this new chapter.
Sure. So usually Dave comes to us with sort of a realized idea, but sort of a blueprint of what we want to do with the character. Kind of here's who we're working with, and here's the general sort of thrust of what we're doing. On the narrative team, our goal is to take that blueprint and sort of fill in all the details, really focusing on the stuff like the motivations and you know everything like about like the character that you see in the game. Yeah.
Okay, so then what are some of the ways that you have all weaved in Lara Croft into Dead by Daylight? And we've got this amazing poster behind me that has Lara Croft, the original survivor. So yeah, how have you guys brought her into Dead by Daylight's lore?
Sure. Well, I think there's some things that are kind of obvious, the big things, you know, the character bios, voiceover lines, memory fragments when we write those for some characters. Those are sort of like the big parts that we use to really tie people's lore into the game. But there's a lot of little things too that are very important. This is more killer-centric, but for example, when we're talking about add-ons, you know, we have these 20 opportunities to look at little mementos and tell stories about a character's past and sort of discover how we got to where we are now. Something that applies to Lara and the survivors as well is when we get to the perks. You know, we kind of look at perks as an opportunity to say, okay, this is who they are now, and this is why they are who they are now. We use that flavor text there to say, here's the character's strengths, here's the things that make them special in our universe, and here's how they got there.
Okay, so with like kind of filling out that flavor text and kind of making sure we're adding that person into our game, can you tell us a bit more about your experience with the Tomb Raider franchise?
Sure. So I was a young kid. I was working my first job. I was delivering flyers around town, and I had just managed to save enough money just to get a PlayStation 1. No game, no memory card, just a PlayStation 1 at the end of the summer. So I got that home, and it came with a demo disc, and that's all I had for a couple of months. So I went through that demo disc a lot, and one of the things that I stuck to the most was one level of Tomb Raider 2 that I probably played 100 or 200 times, shooting the same tiger a bunch of times in that. So that was my first experience, and it wasn't really until the 2013 games that I got really on board. This is when I picked up that game. I was just blown away by it. The presentation of that game, the character growth that we see over the course of that game, and the sort of brutality of it all was kind of shocking and really exciting.
Okay, so with talking about like the character growth that's kind of displayed in the 2013 Lara Croft game, can you tell us about how we're getting Lara Croft? Like at what stage in her development is she coming into the fog?
Sure. There is a moment in the 2013 game where she's on the tracks of the Solari Brotherhood, who are kind of the bad guys in that game. Mm-hmm. They've taken her friend Sam, and she's managed to find Sam finally after all this time sort of chasing her. But she gets overwhelmed by the Solari Brotherhood. So she has to jump off of a sort of natural rock bridge, and she lands in a river of blood, full of, dismembered like limbs and all this stuff. That felt like the perfect moment for the fog to creep in. So she dives in, feels all these, limbs kind of grabbing at her as she's trying to get back to the surface. Has this Apocalypse Now moment where she rises up out of the blood, and that's when the fog kicks in and she's in a new nightmare.
That sounds like a truly horrific event. I could not be as calm and collected as Lara. So speaking of that and like kind of like how that kind of brings in, can you paint a picture of what kind of qualities Lara is coming into the fog with?
Sure. I mean, up until that point in the game, you can see that she's already gone through so much, physical and emotional damage. She's been shipwrecked. She's lost her mentor. She's lost her best friend, and she's trying to escape a terrifying cult on a remote island. So she's really, started to become hardened at this point. Able to deal with all that damage. But on top of that, she's very intelligent. That's an important side of her for us to talk about. She went to school for archaeology. She's a whiz kid from a family of whiz adults, I guess. She's a genius who took her school and learning very seriously. But to me, I think the most important thing about her is that she always keeps it cool. She's collected, like you said, for me, I freak out if I have a deadline coming up. She's keeping her head straight when entire tigers are coming after her.
Tigers, wolves, T-Rexes, the whole shebang, yeah. So then when you're working with an established character like Lara, how does that affect our process for bringing them into a game with, their and while also making sure to respect the canon and the current narratives they have? So how do we, weave all of that back into us?
For sure. For a character like this, and for any licensed character, what it amounts to for us is an enormous amount of research. I would say I spend about 90% of my time doing research for characters like this. We want to look at absolutely everything that's ever been released for a character like this. There are so many games for this. There's also the films and this and that. While we aren't using all of that, I think it's important to sort of build a mental picture for ourselves based on all that. As I mentioned, we're using the Survivor timeline for this story, but we don't want to completely alienate people who've never played those games.
Right.
There's a lot of people who grew up on those 90s games, playing the demo in their basement in 1998 or whatever year it was. So we try to keep those motivations in mind as we're creating the character to sort of paint a full picture of who they are. Then the next most important thing for us to do is find that perfect moment in whatever timeline we're using for us to have that divergence, that moment where, okay, this is no longer that story, this is now our story, where the fog comes in. Luckily, this was probably the easiest it's ever been. If you don't look at that River of Blood moment and say, yeah, that's when the fog shows up, then please let me know what moment's better.
Yeah, especially because it is such a horrifying, gruesome moment, to be submerged and all. No, thank you. But that kind of goes back to the horror elements that are a part of the Tomb Raider franchise. So can you tell us about how that might have inspired or informed our decision-making process for the narrative?
For sure. I've always looked at this series as, it's not survival horror, but it definitely is horror about surviving, I think.
Bars.
Well, thank you. There's so many moments in this series, the entire sort of first hour of the 2013 game is horrifying to play through. It's really intense and cathartic. Even in the old games, there's a temple in Tomb Raider 2 that is straight up spooky. In Tomb Raider 5, there's this part that you go through when you're in Ireland and you're getting chased by tiny demons. These are horrifying moments in this game series, and it just makes sense to have Lara as a survivor in our game.
Yeah, I'm excited we're getting Lara. They can keep the tiny demons. But thank you so much, Will, for walking us through how we've brought Lara into the world of Dead by Daylight. Next up, we'll be sitting down with Thomas, who's going to be breaking down how Lara's gameplay comes into DBD. All right, now that we know a bit more about how the team brought the iconic Lara Croft into the fog, let's talk gameplay. Please welcome the amazing game designer, Thomas.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the stream. I'm super glad to be sitting down and talking with you, especially because you are the designer responsible for the new chapter perks that we're going to be seeing in Dead by Daylight for both Killer and Survivor. And today, you're here in person, so let's go ahead and talk about how Lara's personality transitions into these perks. So for starters, I've got to ask, were you a fan of the Tomb Raider franchise before you started working on this chapter?
Yes, of course. I mean, I definitely remember playing the game as a kid and thinking, oh my God, this looks so good, right? And then, of course, I had to revisit the franchise for working on this chapter because a lot has happened since playing the game as a kid.
Absolutely. And this is a character that people know and love and basically simonious with gaming in general. So what are the aspects of Lara that you had to brainstorm on or think about when making her perks?
Well, like we always start with Dave Shaw, who gives us the main themes, the pillars of the character, and we get 3 of these, and we sort of like do a bit of research to try to find perk ideas, gameplays that would fit into these ideas. But in this case, all the 3 perks, all the 3 pillars, they translated really neatly into 3 perks, so that was easy. So, I mean, each one of these is called Athlete, Adventurer, and Archaeologist, so that's the 3 ones.
All right. So can you tell me a bit about how they translated into their own perks?
Yes, of course. The first one is called, again, Finesse. And this is the one that connects to Lara as an athlete. So we wanted to make sure that we got to view her athletic side as an important part of, the way she moves her environments and the way she's doing all those cool, like action-y things. So we know we wanted to have that. So we know survivors in Dead by Daylight, they can do like athlete things, and we wanted it to be just a little bit more because the survivors in Dead by Daylight, they don't do superhuman things, so we wanted this to be distinct. So specifically, this perk, it gives you 20% vault speed when you do a fast vault. It doesn't use exhaustion, so you just like this little, it seems like a small margin, but it make a big difference in a chase. Part of the goal here was to make a different kind of athletic perk. We didn't want to have an exhaustion perk because we have a bunch of these already, and they don't work together. So we wanted to have something athletic and also something unique.
Yeah, I did notice that with Lara's animation, it was different. So can you explain a bit more about how the team came to decide that?
Yeah, well, we definitely wanted to have a cool animation for this, and we asked to create a brand new animation for the fast vault on the window and on the palette, so that it would, really showcase Lara's acrobatic abilities and, what she's capable of. The movement is like a parkour vault, so the player really feels like they're doing something cool and unique, and also the killer notices it, which is really important for gameplay and also for like the cool aspect of it.
It does look awesome, and it was amazing to use it in trials. And not only is it like unique just for Dead by Daylight, but it was also very Lara Croft, which I think is just a great combination. So what can you tell us about the 2 other perks for Lara?
Well, the second perk is called Hardened, and this one is built around the adventurer theme. As an adventurer, she's been through a lot, and she now almost never gets rattled. And, this is what, the kind of feeling we wanted to give for Hardened. You complete a certain task, and you're rewarded for the rest of the trial. In this case, you don't scream, and you see the killer's aura in specific conditions. So we know that, she's always going through temples, going on quests for specific items and artifacts. So in this case, in the Dead by Daylight game, it turns into like opening chests and cleansing totems. So once you do that, you're rewarded with this kind of like fearlessness in a trial that we discussed.
Okay. So that would just leave the Archaeologist perk. So can you expand on that one?
Yes, of course. This one's also very simple. It's called Specialist. And as you mentioned, it's kind of like the archaeology perk theme. It works by granting you tokens when you open chests. So this is something you can do, go around, open chests, and then once you go on a generator and do a great skill check, you're going to get what we call BNP, short for brand new part, which is this kind of like progress that cannot be broken on a generator, even if the killer kicks it. So when you open a chest, you get this extra value that you can use for something else, and that's pretty cool. Even if the killer kicks it, you're not going to lose that progress. So it's a great payoff, and then it's fun to go around, and I think it fits with Lara Croft.
I'm really excited to use that perk in my next trial. So last question, and this is a question we like to ask all of our game designers. Is there any tips that you'd like to give to players for using Lara's perks for the first time in their trials?
Yes, of course. The goal is always to be fun and simple and also, in a sense, effective. And each of these perks can bring you in a different direction. If you want to do some kind of build crafting, you could use a single perk with, 3 other that sort of mesh with it. But you could also just take all 3 and go for a jack of all trades kind of idea, or just kind of go for the adept, I suppose. If you're looking to play off of finesse, my call would probably be lithe, which is just an obvious choice. You just do this really cool fast vault, and then you start running at a high speed. So that would work very well, and then you have the cool animation on top of it. Hardened plays more into a stealth kind of build. So in this case, you could use urban evasion, or maybe there's a chest build, and it's the same for specialist, right? It plays off with chests. So maybe there's a chest build out there. I'm just willing it out. So you could use coin offering, plunderer's instinct, and then if for some reason the killer uses hoarder, I don't know why they would, but they could. You're just in business,
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to pairing finesse with lithe, especially just get that really cool animation and just take off. So thank you so much for walking us through all of that, Thomas. It's really been a pleasure, and I'm so glad we had you on the stream. Next up is going to be me and Eric to prep you for our next segment, so stay tuned. I can never get enough about talking about the cosmetics that are coming to Dead by Daylight. So what better way to feed this fire I have than to sit down with our product director, Rose Lee.
Hello.
Welcome to the stream. So we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about not only the Tomb Raider collection, but the Blood and Bones collection, Forgotten Memory, as well as a couple of smaller collections.
Yeah, this section is going to be packed with cool stuff.
All right, so let's go ahead and kick it off by talking about how we've added Lara Croft to Dead by Daylight with her own Tomb Raider collection. She's going to be decked out in a couple of iconic looks. So can you walk us through that?
Yeah, well, to start, each of the 4 outfits from the Tomb Raider collection are from Lara's past adventures during the Survivor Trilogy era, which makes them kind of perfect for Dead by Daylight. She's been around the world and kind of done it all. So we had this long list of outfits on the table from which we could choose from. So we sat down together with a team to comb through them, and we picked the ones that we thought were the most iconic. Some outfits also pay homage to other eras. Lara's tactical adventure, or retrofit outfit as it's called in-game, from Rise of the Tomb Raider. It combines modern-style Lara with a vibrant color palette that's inspired by her iconic look. Everything from the Tomb Raider collection will be available as of today as part of the chapter release, so go check them out.
Okay, and I definitely will be.